many other places. So I, thank Pastor Seth. I thank the community here for being one. And I think this is pretty new for me, so if you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Marisol Hernandez. I'm a recent graduate of Rutgers University. I graduated last year. And the reason I'm up here addressing you is on the issue of the DREAM Act, which, when we talk about immigration legislation, the DREAM Act is one that has garnered a lot of prominent media attention in the past couple of years due to acts of civil disobedience, due to movement building of young immigrant leaders who have decided to stop letting other people speak for them and to stand up for their own rights and their own humanity. There are approximately 65,000 young adults who graduate from high schools in the United States every year, but who lack U.S. citizenship and or that famous quote-unquote green card, which isn't really green anymore. Because when families migrate, and while we're here supporting Indonesian families, you see it right here. They're families. They're not people that are here alone. When families migrate, they come as families. So my mother and my father, when they came from Mexico, they brought me along when I was a year old. And I've grown up in New Jersey ever since. The only two documents that I have that share my name and Mexico on it is my birth certificate and my passport, which is my only legitimate ID. Besides that, everything from my vaccination records to my kindergarten certificate to my high school diploma to my associate's degree to my bachelor's degree all say New Jersey on it. But I lack a social security number. I lack a green card. I am not a U.S. citizen because I was brought across the U.S.-Mexico border in the backseat of a car. And what I wanted to talk a little bit about wasn't so much necessarily myself, because I've been doing this for 7 years. I've done this talking about myself for 7 years to raise awareness of the approximately 2 million people, 1 million of them who are currently under the age of 18 who don't have status, and about another million who came in as children, but that have grown up and are now adults and are not considered children anymore. We're talking about 2 million people. Of the 11 million who are here without status, 2 million either are minors or came in as minors and have thus since been here. What began as simply talking about myself when I was 18 years old developed into something much larger than myself. Extensively, I've talked about what it's like to grow up in the U.S., to grow up in New Jersey, to go on my way to church and pass by Princeton University. But it's really not so much about my own personal story anymore. I think there's a lot more to say about this transformation, this transcendence of self, post-high school and of the turbulence leading up to and including high school. But I keep my story alive, I keep talking about it, because there's aspects of my experience that are shared by an immeasurable number of teens and children currently that are troubled by intersecting oppressive forces that dominate not just our cultures and our communities, but our planet. One with virtues and priorities which are completely upside down. For the teens and families here, this is a little bit about my experience, and I shared a little bit about it already. I've been in New Jersey my entire life since I was 1. I grew up in Princeton, and I didn't really feel any different than anybody else because I'm this all-American kid. I'm a straight-up Jersey girl. But things started getting very complicated in middle school, coincidentally in 2001. 2001 being the year that the DREAM Act was introduced, and 2001 also the year that I was not able to access a scholarship to attend a private high school for free because that form required a social security number and it required my parents' social security number. Documents which we obviously lacked. I became aware then that that's one of the many ways that not having status in this country would prove my life difficult, that would prove that hopeful path of upward social mobility, that American dream would be much more difficult to accomplish, simply because we don't have the right paperwork. I ended up going through high school feeling a little troubled, having to lie consistently to my peers, not about my status, but having to find other excuses, creative excuses as to why I wasn't driving, why I was getting a little depressed about filling out applications. In fact, I didn't really fill out any college applications. I kind of gave up altogether. In senior year, I almost dropped out. But it took the strength and the love of many teachers in my schools, which teachers are some of the greatest allies. I had supportive members in my church community. This is a very great thing that we're doing right now, because you can see how it really does take a village to raise a child, and I was dealt a very supportive, loving village of teachers, a couple family members, friends, and people at my church who gave me the strength, especially my younger siblings, gave me the strength to continue going on, and eventually did graduate high school in 2005 with 3.5 GPA, with honors, being president of several different student organizations and clubs. I then went to county college, and because I'm undocumented, you don't qualify for any financial aid. You don't qualify for a majority of scholarships. So you don't get Pell Grants, you don't get state or federal financial aid. So everything that I had to pay, I paid out of pocket by working 60 to 70 hours a week while already taking care of my own financial, my own expenses, I'm sorry. After county college, and even though it took 5 semesters, a little bit longer than you would say it took most, I also graduated with honors there, and I transferred to Rutgers. Rutgers proved to be a very supportive community as well, and here we have Carlos Fernandez, who will be singing with you and performing with you a little bit later, who is the director of the Center for Latino Arts and Culture. Was probably one of our strongest supporters and advocates for the DREAM Act and students like ourselves. I did graduate last year, but I kind of really glossed over how difficult that was. Not only is it difficult to be a first-generation college student, as some of you may be aware, you kind of have to navigate the educational system because your parents don't speak English and or because your parents were uneducated like mine. But then having to deal with normal teenage things like hormones and boys and girls and friends and parents, and just trying to make it day by day with that looming thought of my family can be deported at any time, with that looming thought of I can't have that 5-year plan that everyone asks me about because I really don't know if I'll even be in New Jersey a year from now. My family has been very lucky to have been not been affected directly by ICE, some of the families here in Highland Park, and for that I am very, very grateful. But truth is that just by the pure virtue of being undocumented, ICE could show up at any time and take me and take my family members, my mother, my father, not my U.S. citizen siblings, all of whom were born here, but us. But then what happens to the kids? ICE in this current immigration policy is breaking up families. And no one really talks about it, but don't you consider that a form of terrorism? Don't you think that what ICE does to the immigrant community is terrorizing them, terrorizing us? So while the Department of Homeland Security is worried about terroristic threats onto Americans, they themselves are terrorizing internal communities. Oh, the irony that is Homeland Security and immigration policy system. Now, one thing that I've reflected on consistently is that I advocate for a bill that has the potential to adjust for 2 million people to adjust their status, but studies have indicated that less than a quarter of them may be successful in adjusting their status under the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act is a bill that says if you came into the United States before you were 15 years old, if you graduate from high school in the U.S. or get your GED in the U.S., if you maintain good moral character as defined by immigration law, and if you've been here for at least 5 years, then you would be granted conditional permanent residency. But notice the word conditional. In a period of 6 years after being granted that conditional residency, you have to serve 2 years in the U.S. military or attend college for 2 years. So human beings have to earn their citizenship. They have to earn their right to be treated like a human being. But that is what the DREAM Act says. And while I admit that this bill is not perfect, while I admit that this bill is very narrow-minded in scope as well, to me, I take it as a stepping stone, because I see the youth that would qualify for the DREAM Act as the new future leaders of this immigrant community. To be able to speak for those who choose not to speak out of fear, because we ourselves have internalized the fear, but some of us, like me, I just don't care. I'm tired of it. I've been tired of it. I'm confronted by what may be this ethical and moral dilemma, because so many of us are fighting so that the DREAM Act passes. But how many of you here, other fearful advocates, Pastor Seth, how many of you have had to, quote unquote, tone down your demands for comprehensive immigration reform so that our sub-movement, which is the DREAM Act, gains ferocity and momentum? Sometimes I feel like a traitor. Legalize me, but continue to blame my parents for breaking the law. But parents, workers, adults, dropouts, we all deserve respect, dignity, and humane consideration. I don't deserve special treatment because it wasn't, quote unquote, my fault to come here. I don't deserve special treatment because I was an outstanding student with the tenacity to put myself through college. The reality is this system is broken, inefficient, outdated, and to focus on any argument that detracts from that reality is limiting. Stop criminalizing individuals. Don't inspect the micro and focus on the individual, but examine the macro. Let's look at how this system indignantly and unjustly punishes people who came to fill the gaping holes of employment demands, people who came driven out by starving economic policies, motivated and mostly originating from international agencies that are controlled, ironically, some may say, by this same very country that is trying to drive all of us out. The chances of my parents, only in their early to mid-20s or young, of quote-unquote going back to school are slim compared to the potential of those in my demographic. And I want to tap into that, which is why I still continue to work for the DREAM Act and to work for young adults in my situation across the state. I want to tap into this demographic to work with willing and universally dismissed possible agents of change so that they find themselves the way I did, to travel, to experience a multitude of worlds and cultures without physically traveling, through a college education, because education is a right, not a privilege. I want that for them, for all of us, for you, to discover one's own moral conviction and to live by it. Because I think we all have a moral obligation to continue to speak up and break this silence, because this silence continues to drive this passivity, which continues to drive the inaction by our quote-unquote leaders in this political system. So thank you.